Tristan Vanderman arrived at the courthouse as if he were headed to another of his father's business breakfasts. Precise, performative, and small, designed to showcase him. His shoes clicked on the marble like a metronome counting down to a lesson he didn't know he needed. The Vanderman name had been a shield his entire life. Schoolyard scuffles ended when his driver's SUV rolled up, awkward social moments smoothed by a dad's phone call. Every consequence softened by the glossy reach of money. At 26, Tristan had the swagger of someone whose scaffolding of privilege had been built into his bones. Yet this morning, his jaw felt hollow with a new and unfamiliar knot of nerves. He stepped through the courthouse doors, flanked by two men in expensive suits, his publicist and a lawyer with a face meant to reassure investors, not to probe character. A junior production assistant, because Tristan fancied himself an influencer of substance, carried a camera rig that would later show every reaction in high definition. Tristan pulled his collar up casually, practiced to appear nonchalant, and kept his head high. Cameras and reporters clustered like birds around a feeder. He had expected them. He had dressed to be admired. He had been charged with reckless driving and resisting arrest after an episode that had been more foolish than criminal. With a night of too many drinks and an ego that mistook speed for invincibility, he had swerved his father's midnight blue Bentley through a crowded intersection, brushing by an elderly vendor's cart and then arguing with the officer who stepped in his way. The vendor hadn't wanted to press charges. The community wanted accountability, especially after a video of the near miss went viral. Tristan's world did not revolve around law so much as it orbited around optics. The scandal mattered less for itself and more for how it might be explained on a late-night talk show. The courtroom smelled of old wood and coffee, a scent Tristan had only known from movies and the idle hours he'd spent in his father's corner office pretending to read contracts. Observers, real people with lives unsuited to his privilege, sat in the gallery. Some wore the wary look of those who'd been wronged, and some the hard stare of those who had learned the law was not, in fact, a playbook for wealth. Underneath the publicist's practiced smile, Tristan felt something sharp, the raw awareness of being watched by citizens not hired to applaud him. Judge Caprio entered like a quiet storm. He took the bench with a particular humility that belied the authority of his robe. The man had a reputation, not for showy rulings or theatrical admonitions, but for seeing through the theater people brought into his courtroom. He had the kind of face that suggested a life had been spent listening closely to other people's stories. No gilded saunter here. It was the steadiness of someone whose decisions were measured not by headlines, but by consequence. Tristan's lawyer went through the motions, pleaded for leniency, reminded the court of good family standing, promised charitable sponsorships, and suggested a diversion program. Messages floated across the courtroom. Offers of community service in exchange for a softer sentence, pledges of monetary donations to repair the damaged vendor's cart, the inevitable statements from aggrieved parties. It was businesslike and dull to Tristan until the prosecutor, a woman with tempered resolve, spoke in plain terms about public safety and personal responsibility. Her voice made the veneer of convenience peel thin. When the prosecutor introduced the video, an unflinching, grainy clip shot from a phone in the crowd, Tristan felt his stomach sink. He remembered the car fishtailing, the vendor's shriek, the shock of seeing the stall topple. On screen, his face looked smaller than in the mirror. He had expected sympathy. The clip offered only facts. The judge watched in silence. No commentary, no theatrics, just the kind of cool attention that left no corner of truth unobserved. Then the question of sentencing arose. Tristan had been advised to appear contrite. His publicist's whispered script was rehearsed to the point of brittleness. A heartfelt apology, community service, a PR-friendly narrative. Tristan could have read from it, but something in him rebelled. He imagined logbooks of media metrics that would show a sharp spike in followers post-apology, an invitation from a breakfast show host to talk through his vulnerability. A crisis, if handled correctly, could be content gold. He had enough practice performing remorse to know what the world wanted to see. When Judge Caprio asked if anyone present wanted to speak, victims, community members, or the defendant, his lawyer pushed him forward with a practiced nod. This would be his scene. Tristan stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat, and aimed for something like sincerity. "I want to say I'm sorry," he began, and for a moment it sounded real. The judge nodded, and a photographer's flash cut the air. "I was reckless. I shouldn't have driven. His voice wavered like a recorded promo for contrition. He scanned the gallery, looking for the sympathetic camera angle, and briefly locked eyes with the vendor, who folded his arms and looked away. A few murmurs of approval from the gallery, more for the shape of the apology than for its substance, gave Tristan the illusion of control. That illusion is a fragile thing. When his lawyer suggested that more context might help, Tristan felt the old defense mechanism rise. He thought of the instant he had been in the street, how small the moment felt beside the vastness of his family's influence. He wanted someone to understand that he didn't mean harm, an instinctual plea for exoneration, for the world to see him as a person, not a headline. The lawyer in that soft legal tone said, "Your Honor, if it pleases the court, Mr. Vanderman would like to speak about the circumstances, about the pressure, about public scrutiny, and about his family's contributions to charitable work. He's prepared to explain." Tristan cut him off. The room heard the quickness in his voice, the flare of impatience he'd never been taught to hide. "Your Honor, with all due respect," he said, leaning forward, too casual for the dignity of the courtroom. "If you just Google my father, you'd see we've done a lot. He supports schools, hospitals. We're not monsters." The words left his mouth like an arrow, intended to pierce through scorn and land in the soft belly of sympathy. Instead, they hung in the room like an unwelcome announcement. Cameras tilted, reporters sharpened their pens. The judge's expression did not change, but the air thickened. Judge Caprio's eyes rested on Tristan with an ease that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with the long view of consequences. "Mr. Vanderman," he said, in a tone that required no theatrics, "we're not here to Google anyone. We're here to hear about your actions." Tristan tried a smile, one he had practiced for gala photographs, but it looked wrong in that light. "I'm just saying," he started, but the judge lifted a hand to shape silence. It was a small gesture, but it felt vast. "You are 26 years old," Judge Caprio said. "You have done something that could have taken someone's life. The court recognizes any philanthropic efforts your family may have undertaken, but those do not erase the risk you created. This is not a matter of reputation, it is a matter of responsibility." There was no dramatic thunderclap. The judge's rebuke was not sensational, it was surgical. It exposed the tendons of entitlement and left them raw. The court did its work then. Witnesses spoke. The vendor, with quiet dignity, explained how his stall had been his livelihood and how easy things can topple when someone with privilege behaves as if rules were suggestions. Neighbors and civic leaders talked about the pattern of near incidents in the area and how a wealthy name had often meant a different standard in people's lives. Tristan felt the walls of his personal theater collapsing. The judge listened, then sent Tristan out of the courtroom for a moment to consider alternatives. In the hallway, under the fluorescent hum, his assistant whispered quick talking points, how this could be spun, which networks preferred which narrative. He wanted to call his father, to arrange the right podium, to coordinate the right public face. He thought, briefly, in the old automatic way, that money could purchase absolution. He lifted his phone, thumb poised to dial. But he did not call. Or rather, he did in a way, reaching for the old safety that had always protected him. Texts to publicists, messages to lawyers, the familiar choreography of crisis management. His finger hovered over his father's name and then fell. In the silence of an institutional corridor, he found the small, unfamiliar sound of his own heartbeat. For the first time, he saw what the rest of the world had seen in the grainy video. A person who had used speed to erase consequences, who believed his name could bend the law around him. Inside the courtroom again, Judge Caprio offered an option, a restorative justice program. The judge explained it with the patience of someone used to speaking to people who didn't like what they saw in the mirror. You will meet the individuals affected, you will hear their stories, and you will be required to make amends that are meaningful beyond a check. Tristan's lawyer leaned in, whispering that such programs were often a softer path than jail, that they could be spun as heroic growth,
press-friendly and palatable. Tristan flinched at the idea that his penance could be packaged. He found himself bargaining on the inside. What service would be short? What apology would be photogenic? The old reflexes sought the easiest cuts. But something in the judge's voice, more steady than condemnation, less easy than compassion, pressed a different possibility into his skull. Judge Caprio continued, his gaze level. You will spend time with the vendor whose cart you nearly destroyed. You will work in community centers. You will attend responsible driving courses, not as a formality but because you should not be allowed to walk away unchanged. And if you fail to comply, the court will consider further penalties. The stipulations were concrete, and somehow that straightforwardness felt foreign to Tristan. He had been used to conditions that could be bought away or negotiated through PR. The judge had given him only hard decisions. Face the